football season, 2 games that will likely decide both divisions, the Big Ten East and the Big Ten West. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second ever edition of the Locked On Big Ten Game Day Live. I am Ben Stevens, the host of Locked On Big Ten. He is George Balecki, a sports reporter and anchor in NBC 15 in Madison, Wisconsin. We are getting you set for what we are coining Showdown Saturday in the Big Ten. 2 games that will decide most likely who heads to Indianapolis on December 19th to play in the all-decisive Big Ten championship game. On the eastern side, it is Indiana and Ohio State, a top 10 matchup. And in the West Division for the top spot, it is a battle between Northwestern and Wisconsin in Evanston, Illinois. George, you are our Wisconsin guy, of course, living and working in Madison, Wisconsin. But as we look at the Big Ten East, let's talk about the stakes of what Saturday's matchup has. A top 10 tilt between 9th-ranked Indiana and 3rd-ranked Ohio State. I can't believe I'm even saying the words 9th-ranked Indiana, but yet here we find ourselves. A little history lesson, George, as we get into this matchup. This is the first ever regular season top 10 game for the Indiana football program. It is Ohio State's 99th. That is tied at the tops of Big Ten at college football all across the board with Oklahoma. That is what we have at stake. That is how the stage is set. George, a monumental Saturday in the Big Ten Conference.
That's what I'm excited for because, you know, you had certain dates circled on your calendar, and we all knew going into this season, in the Big Ten West at least, that this Wisconsin-Northwestern game would be very significant when it comes to their division standings, when it comes to playing in the postseason, the Big Ten Championship in Indianapolis. But everyone was really expecting this to hinder on the Minnesota and Iowa game. It's quickly flipped. You and I, when we were previewing this season, we had high expectations for Northwestern themselves, bringing in a new offensive coordinator, bringing in Peyton Ramsey, bringing back so much for this defense, especially at their linebackers. So we knew how important that game would be. But for the Big Ten East, like you said, it's amazing because there'd be the joke that, oh yeah, by the way, Indiana does have a football team. Don't forget, they're just a basketball school. But look at what Tom Allen's doing. Look at what Michael Penix Jr. has been doing at the quarterback position. And here are 2 members. You're one of the founding ones of the Michael Penix 4 Heisman fan club. But it's amazing to see the run they've been on. And when you go to Ohio State too, I mean, the quarterback showdown we're about to get. One is a guy that can go 2 for this year, a Heisman Trophy and a national championship. For Michael Penix, well, he could be a dark horse for maybe the Heisman. I know we like to joke about
That's
it, but
what we're saying.
Talk. But also he could be the dark horse of playing spoiler along with the rest of his team, that aggressive defense. I just love the matchups in this game because IU loves to force turnovers, but Justin Fields, he's the caretaker of the football. He doesn't give it away, and he's one of the best players in college football. He's an NFL caliber player right now, and he's taking on a very tenacious defense.
And a reminder, wherever you are watching this, please contribute to the chat. We want to hear your takes on today's huge games. 5 games today across the Big Ten Conference. Obviously, the 2 biggest in Showdown Saturday to decide the Big Ten East and the Big Ten West, but 3 other great games. And shout out to Sean Zock, an incredible golf writer who says, oh, a Madison guy. Yes, our Madison guy, George Balecki, bringing you the insight for Wisconsin and Northwestern and across this Big Ten slate all day long. Shout out, Sean. Sean, thank you for contributing, a Wisconsin guy in his own right and a great writer for golf.com, Golf Magazine. If you're not following Sean Zock, you need to be doing that right now. Anyway, let's get back to the Big Ten slate today. We talked about the history and what is building up to this game between Indiana and Ohio State. The Buckeyes have won 25 straight in this series, but IU has been great at snapping streaks all season long. They snapped a 24-game losing streak to Michigan, taking down one of the Blue Bloods in the Big Ten. They also ended a losing skid of sorts. They had only beaten Penn State 1 of their last 23 times prior to that season opener, but they got rid of that in that opening week. So Indiana, a perfect 4-0. They sit alone at the top of the Big Ten East right now. Ohio State just behind them at 3-0. I know a lot of Hoosier fans have been screenshotting and taking pictures of Indiana standing alone in the Big Ten East right now. It will be decided today virtually who will be moving on as the Big Ten East champion. So let's get over to the Big Ten West. We'll get some more insight from the host of Locked On Buckeyes, Jay Stevens, in just a moment about that Ohio State-Indiana game. But as we move to the Big Ten West, Northwestern and Wisconsin, the first time these 2 teams are facing as top 20 foes since 1962. If you think I sounded smart right there, I got that stat from my good friend George Balecki, who gave that to me on Monday heading into this game. George, you are giving us the Wisconsin perspective. What do you see in this game between the Wildcats and the Badgers?
A whole lot of good defense, that's for sure. I mean, for Wisconsin right now, they have one of the top defenses in the country. Yes, they've played just 2 games, but averaging just over, allowing 9 points a game, just over 218 yards a game. But this game's in Evanston. Weird things have happened there for the Badgers. They're 1-5 at Northwestern since 2003. All 5 of those losses were when UW was ranked. But for Wisconsin, I mean, this is the big action. This is the statement-making win of their season so far, as it is for Northwestern too. But for the Badgers, they come out to open the season, absolutely dominate Illinois. They go into the big house and they literally show the changing of the guard and saying that we are the superior program now to the Michigan Wolverines by putting up the most points against them, putting up the most points in the big house and the biggest margin of victory. But after sparking that demolition in Ann Arbor, they cannot let down today against Northwestern. What I love about this game, of course, is the Big Ten West implications, but the quarterbacks in this one, Graham Mertz and Peyton Ramsey, taking on the defenses they will face, the run games and the run defenses especially, because Garrett Groshek should return. He missed last game due to COVID protocol. But Joe Rudolph, the offensive coordinator for Wisconsin, saying they're going to go with the same O-line. Cole Van Lanen, John Dietzen, Caden Lyles, Logan Bruss, Tyler Beach. Now, UW's coming off an output where they put up 341 rushing yards on Michigan. But UW does not like to put up, or I'm sorry, Northwestern does not like to allow those same yardage. We will see what they do. Rashad Wildgoose is back to lead that secondary. It is from top to bottom when you have the matchups here. And you go to the linebacking core as well with Patty Fisher, Chris Bergen, Blake Gallagher of Northwestern. They're only allowing 91.8 rushing yards a game. Shout out to Mike Hankwitz at defensive coordinator. Of course, Pat Fitzgerald too. You just see it's strength on strength in this one, and there's not a lot of leeway. And that's what I love about this game because, yeah, the rankings may show a big discrepancy. The state of the programs may show a big difference as well, but it's a top 20 showdown. It's the top 2 teams in the Big Ten West, and arguably outside of Ohio State and Indiana, the top 2 teams have looked the best so far in Big Ten play. That's what I love about this game.
This is going to be a classic Big Ten football game. It is cold. It is windy in Evanston, Illinois. These are the 2 best defenses in the Big Ten Conference, 2 of the best in the entire country. Wisconsin ranks 4th in opponents' points per play. Northwestern ranks 7th in opponents' points per play. This is going to be what we have in a showdown of a classic Big Ten game, grinded out football to see what happens in that game between Northwestern and Wisconsin. And what's at stake here, although Wisconsin has played 2 less games than Northwestern at this point of the season, due to the Big Ten rules in this head-to-head tiebreaker, if the Wildcats get the better of the Badgers, they will move on to the Big Ten title game, assuming the rest of the season plays out as such. But if Wisconsin beats Northwestern today, despite a smaller sample size, they will have that head-to-head tiebreaker, and they will be the favorites coming out of the Big Ten West. So now let's go back to the Big Ten East. Indiana and Ohio State, 9th-ranked Indiana, 3rd-ranked Ohio State. And joining us now is the host of Locked On Buckeyes. It is Jay Stevens to give us the insight as I pull up the graphics here, making sure we can see Jay in this beautiful layout we have here on Locked On Live. Is it there? It is. There we go. Jay Stevens is live with us, a man with a fantastic last name that is a lot like mine. Jay, it is great to have you here on the 2nd ever iteration of the Locked On Big Ten Game Day Live show.
How you doing, guys? Glad to be here.
Jay, we are glad to have you. Let's dive right into it, right? We have discussed at length this week the matchup between Indiana and Ohio State for this weekend. We have talked about trying to find some areas in this game that both teams can take advantage of. One we've highlighted, Jay, is the ability for IU's defense to take the ball away so far this season, 12 takeaways through 4 games, but Ohio State doesn't really turn the ball over. As you look at this matchup with Justin Fields facing that IU defense, what is a key for Ohio State to make sure they take care of the ball today?
Really just do what they have been doing. There's been a couple turnovers. I know Steel Chambers fumbled, I believe, on a fake punt, but take care of the ball and continue to let Fields get comfortable. Now, the secondary of the Hoosiers is better, possibly the best one he'll see the entire time. So processing he'll need to process things quicker, which is actually one thing he does. Maybe one of his downfalls, one of the few downfalls he has is his ability to process plays and to get the ball out quickly. But just really I think that's basically it. You mentioned the weather. This is football weather. Then you always have Big Ten tweets. Well, we have Big Ten football weather today in Columbus. I'm excited for it. It's a big game for Master T. It's a time for him to really see and show that he is deserving of the number 1 spot, or Trey Sermon step up and show you're deserving of the number 1 spot. I think we'll see more runs, and we're going to see how good the Buckeyes truly are at securing the ball.
Jay, I like that point you bring up because I'm looking at the running backs too. For Master Teague, Trey Sermon, whoever you want to be, they're still waiting for that breakout performance. Rain is falling out in Columbus. There's not a lot of wind though, but surely when your best player and the guy you want to put the ball in his hands every play, as he does, of course, with Justin Fields and Michael Penix is those two. But the one thing that jumps out at me is that this Ohio State defense allowing 355 yards a game. Who has to step up? Which position group do you think really has to control this game to limit Michael Penix, to limit Wapweiler, to limit Trey Freifogel and this IU offense?
I'll go one. I was going to go two, but I'll just stick with one. The one weakness of the defense easily is the cornerbacks. Putting them on an island has been a downfall. You're going up against Freifogel. You go up against Wapweiler. You're going to have to go. You're going up against two guys that have 24 catches on the season. Freifogel last week, I believe, had 11, over 200 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, a career day for him. He's excited. He's hyped. You have to just basically do your job. Now, putting them on the guys that have been on an island, it has been somewhat of a struggle. Sean Wade's been in position, but has made some key errors while in position. It has caused the other player to score a touchdown in that moment or for Wade to get embarrassed, a quick slant, or things like that. So it's basically the cornerbacks. So you're going to have Sevyn Banks and Wade on the outside. I believe Williamson in the nickel corner or slot corner spot. They have to step up. Peyton Hendershot, watch out for him at tight end. Go back to the Penn State game. The Buckeyes did a phenomenal job guarding Pat Freiermuth. Really had him flustered and frustrated the entire game. Continue that same trend with him there. But the corners, who I'm watching to see how they respond against this passing attack, that can be lethal.
A great note, by the way, from a Locked On Nittany Lions podcast, a great member of this Locked On Podcast Network. Just a word of advice for the Buckeyes. Don't let Indiana take you to overtime. When the Hoosiers get to overtime and they reach for that pylon, it could break an entire program, as we have seen with Penn State, who is 0-4 so far this season. We'll hear from the host of Locked On Nittany Lions as we look forward to Penn State's game against Iowa in just a little bit. But, Jay, I have to ask you our final question here. Ohio State is a huge favorite in this game. 20.5 is the spread at the moment. Do you think Ohio State covers that big margin?
Yes. Quick answer, yes.
There we go.
You and I discussed it earlier the other day. I said they were going to cover the spread. That has not changed at all. Due to the front seven, watch the game. You'll see Big Ten football weather. Why the front seven of the Buckeyes is why I believe they will cover the spread.
I like that. Pete Werner, Herf Borland there, big guys that got to step up. Ben, you remember to week one, I said Ohio State would cover, what was that, a 26-point spread, and they did.
They did. They look good, even though Nebraska stuck around a little bit in that first half. Ohio State tends to pull away late. History is on Jay's side as well. The Buckeyes have won 25 straight against Indiana, and the last 4 matchups haven't been particularly close. Ohio State has won by an average margin of 28 or more points in those last 4 games against the Hoosiers. Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes, thank you for coming on. The second ever Locked On Big Ten Game Day Live. You can put that on your resume, my friend, and I hope you do.
I will definitely do that. Thanks, guys. Have a lot of fun.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it. All right. So as we move on to the rest of the games in this Big Ten slate, a note that we need to touch on, George, in my opinion, is the idea that this is kind of a playoff semifinal as we look at the national landscape today on Showdown Saturday. Some of the odds that ESPN's All-State Playoff Predictor has put out, if Ohio State and Wisconsin win today, there is more than a 50% chance that both teams will play in that college football playoff, be a part of the Final Four. The Big Ten could have 2 teams in the college football playoff, determining on what happens today in the games between Ohio State and Indiana and Wisconsin and Northwestern.
I know that Wisconsin, they've spoken about their expectations improving, and part of that is a college football playoff. But to see those numbers jump out at me, Ben, still absolutely blows my mind. And it's amazing that they come out with those numbers, and it hinders on these 4 teams in the Big Ten. I mean, it's well represented, and you always see the SEC or the Big 12 are those conferences that could get 2 schools in. Sometimes the SEC is pushing for the argument for 3. It's amazing to see the Big Ten with 2 schools that could potentially be in the conversation for the college football playoff.
If Ohio State and Wisconsin win today, that playoff predictor puts the Buckeyes' chance at a 65% margin to get into the CFP. Wisconsin would be at a 60% margin. If for whatever reason we have 2 upsets today and Indiana and Northwestern win, the Hoosiers have a 28 or 22% chance rather to make the college football playoff. Northwestern have a 28% chance. That is what is at stake today on Showdown Saturday. The 2 division crowns and also a shot at that Final Four in the CFP. Quickly, before we look ahead to some of the other games on the slate today, let's look back to last night. Purdue and Minnesota. And I think the last thing we have to say is, what the heck were the refs seeing? The offensive pass interference call against Purdue late in that game, under a minute left. Jack Plummer finds his tight end Payne Durham in the end zone for what looked to be the go-ahead winning touchdown for the Boilermakers. And somehow it was a phantom OPI call. Purdue gets it taken away. The next play, Jack Plummer throws a pick, and Minnesota comes out victorious. I don't know what they were seeing on that OPI. It was one of the hardest calls ever. I'll just say this right now to Jeff Brom. He can lambaste those refs, and I will pay his fine that the Big Ten hands down, because that was ridiculous. A terrible, terrible call that cost this Purdue team a 3-1 start to the Big Ten play.
You're the one that's got that bank account to back that up. I do not. So I'll leave that to you. But I agree with Jeff Brom if he just absolutely lights up the refs. And I agree with you. And it was an amazing back and forth football game. It was under the lights on a Friday. Everyone, the college football spotlight was on the Big Ten. And the refs take away all that discussion of how well both teams played offensively as well. Rondale Moore's finally returned to the Big Ten. I loved seeing that man get back to work, but you're right. It was an amazing throw. And I know that Purdue let some opportunities get away from them, 2 missed field goals. There's another questionable touchdown call, and I'm big on, you never want to put enough room between you and your opponent for the ref to intervene and decide the game. But Purdue made every single play they had to do down to the wire to win that game, and the refs did intervene and did take it away, and that's absolutely terrible. And there's a point where accountability matters when it comes to officials. What did you see? Why did you call that in that moment when it was simple hand fighting that happens on every single play?
Did they even touch each other? That's my biggest thing. I don't think there was any kind of contact.
It was when the tight end was on about the 5-yard line. You see hand fighting as he's making his release, and you see a full arm extension, but it's not like a complete push. The DB falls. It's simple hand fighting you see on every play. I had to go to the Zapruder film to break it down and find it. Is that the frame? Yeah, that's it. And the fact that if I have to go to the Zapruder film to find that, there's no way that ref sees it in real time. And like I said, it's just simple hand fighting for playing football. Purdue got penalized.
Regardless, Minnesota comes out on top 34-31. A lot of offense last night in the Twin Cities, nearly 886 total yards combined between the two teams. And like George touched on, a lot of NFL wide receiver talent out there. For the Gophers, Rashad Bateman and Chris Ottman-Bell will be playing in the league in just a few years. And great to have Rondale Moore back, the reigning, or 2 years ago, Big Ten Freshman of the Year in the entire conference. He and David Bell, probably the best receiving core in all of the Big Ten Conference. Great to see Rondale Moore back healthy and playing for the Boilermakers. So let's move on to the rest of Saturday's slate. One of the biggest games comes in the middle portion of it on BTN, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, Iowa and Penn State. This line, George, has moved like crazy. Iowa was a 2.5-point favorite at the early portion of yesterday. Now Penn State finds themselves as a 2-point favorite. Let's quickly set up Iowa before we get to Kevin McGuire, the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. Iowa's rushing offense has started to find its groove. In the last 2 games, they have ran for 226 yards against Michigan State 2 weeks ago, and then 235 yards against Minnesota last Friday night. And Tyler Goodson is becoming that breakout star we thought he would be in the Big Ten Conference. The sophomore running back for Iowa has had 110 yards or more in each of the last 2 games and 2 touchdowns in each of those last 2 games. And now we look at Penn State's side, because the Nittany Lions are on the brink of doing something they probably never thought they would be doing, and that is starting 0-5. It would be the first 0-5 start in Penn State football program history. And now joining us, as you can see, is the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, Kevin McGuire, who has been contributing to the chat. He is eager to talk about the Nittany Lions today in this game against Iowa. Kevin, it is great to have you back. You are the only guest in the history of Locked On Big Ten Game Day Live to be here twice. So that is something that I hope you put up in the mantle behind you, and something that you hold near and dear to your heart.
If you send me a certificate, I will print it out and I will post it right here for the next time I'm on, because hopefully I will be on again. But I don't know if I would say I'm eager to talk about Penn State, but I'm
Fair
here
enough.
willing to do the services that you're requesting for me. So let's get to it.
Kevin, one of the biggest things looking into this game is, what will the quarterback situation be like for Penn State? We saw Will Levis come on last week against Nebraska, spell a struggling Sean Clifford. What is the indication out of Happy Valley right now? Who will be starting under center for Penn State in this game against the Hawkeyes?
James Franklin has been keeping it sort of close to the vest, as you would imagine, but I do think that when the game starts up, you're going to see Sean Clifford be out there as a starter. Just a guess. I'm not saying with any inside information or anything like that, but I do think that we will see Sean Clifford at least start the game. I will say, though, I think that Will Levis has a good opportunity to be involved in the offensive game plan in the first half. before things probably go awry. So I think that that'll probably be the way to go, because we've seen some good things out of Will Levis when he took over last week against Nebraska. Sean Clifford has certainly had his struggles this season. So if those struggles continue, I think we will shift more towards Will Levis. But I think Sean Clifford's going to get a chance once again to redeem himself. And honestly, he's a team captain. He's an upperclassman. I think there's a lot of respect for him. So I don't see any reason why that would not be the case for this Saturday against Iowa.
Outside of the quarterback position, Kevin, I mean, as Ben touched on it, how well that Iowa has been running the ball defensively. What do you think it's going to come down to for Penn State to hopefully squeak out and earn their first win?
Honestly, they need to get off to a better start in the first half. And I think the offensive struggles in the first half of games really takes the spotlight, but the defense has been just as poor. There's a reason it takes both sides to dig as big a hole as Penn State has in the first halves of games this year. And the defense has been very disappointing. So I think it's very important that they get off to a very feisty start, see some energy out of that defensive line, bring some pressure on this young Iowa quarterback, and try to cause him to make some mistakes. And that's going to be a big key for them, because in the second half of games this year, Penn State's offense and the defense, they do play better. But if they can do that in the first half, then things could be much different. So I think it's very important for the defense to kind of set the tone today.
And Iowa's defense has been very good this season. They are third in the Big Ten, just behind those stout defenses of Wisconsin and Northwestern. They rank fifth in the country in opponents' points per play, third in the country in opponents' yards per play. And that Penn State offense has stuttered at times this year, not being able to figure out what Kirk Ciarrocca's scheme is just yet. So, Kevin, we laid out what's at stake for Penn State today. They are on the brink of the first ever 0-5 start in Nittany Lions football program history. Do you think it happens today, or will Penn State pick up their first win of the season against Iowa?
I think that at some point, Penn State's going to have to win a game almost by accident. I'm already on record. I don't think that it's going to be today. I think that the way that Iowa's been playing, this is not a team that Penn State should be ready to take on and be able to afford to make any of those mistakes. So I think that the trends are going to continue. I think that there will be some mistakes by Penn State. I think Iowa will capitalize on them. And then Iowa's probably going to find a way to hold on the second half. So I've got Iowa winning this game. It could be an ugly game, as Penn State-Iowa games traditionally have been over the years. So I would not expect a whole lot of scoring, but I think Iowa wins a little bit of a defensive battle today in Happy Valley.
There we go. That's how you know Kevin McGuire will shoot you straight, because he's not just picking Penn State as he is the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He provides some great college football perspective. Give Kevin a follow on Twitter at KevinOnCFB, and make sure you're tuning in to the Locked On Nittany Lions podcast as well to get that insight. Kevin, great to have you here for the second straight time, the second time we've done Locked On Big Ten Game Day Live.
I'm 2 for 2. Let's see if we can make it 3 for 3, whenever the next time that is.
There will be another one. That is my promise to the good folks out there of the Big Ten community. Kevin, thank you again. Enjoy the game, or at least try to enjoy the game between Penn State and Iowa. Maybe have a couple Coors Lights. Maybe. Love the Locked On Podcast Network, and we love Coors Light.
Might need a reason to chill later on. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Of course, Kevin. Talk to you soon. All right. So that is what we have so far. Let's look at a few other games. 2 other games to discuss in the Big Ten slate today. 5 games total today. We have hit on the 2 biggest ones. Showdown Saturday, Indiana and Ohio State, Northwestern and Wisconsin. There was your preview for Penn State and Iowa. We have 7 minutes until kickoff. Big noon kick between the 9th-ranked Hoosiers and the 3rd-ranked Buckeyes. But we look at another team in the Big Ten East right now. Michigan visits Rutgers tonight, 7:30 p.m. The primetime game for the Big Ten. Whoop-dee, not exactly the one we were hoping for or expecting. Michigan, has lost 3 straight games. They are off to a 1-3 start, the worst in over half a decade in Ann Arbor. And as George touched down at the beginning, Wisconsin dominated Michigan last week on Saturday. 49-11 is the worst game, the worst loss Michigan has suffered at the Big House in its entire football program's history. So that is what we have to set the stage for Michigan as they head into Rutgers. It's also a conversation that will follow Michigan this year as they continue to struggle. Jim Harbaugh's seat as the head coach of Michigan is very hot right now. George, what are some of your thoughts on where Michigan stands and what they could possibly do to try to turn the momentum in Ann Arbor?
I mean, they got to win the big games, and they just haven't been doing that. Harbaugh in his time, 3-9 combined against Michigan State and Ohio State, but lump Michigan State into there. That's the team they got to beat every year, and he hasn't been doing that. It starts with a must-win game tonight. You'd never think Michigan and Rutgers would be at that, But that's the point. That's the status, and that's the point of this program now. And you wonder, it's always been get his quarterback in, get his recruits in. Jim Harbaugh will get in there and do it. It's at the point where is his voice, do they need a new one in the locker room? And you think about some of the candidates out there, Luke Fickell at Cincinnati, Brett Venables, a Clemson defensive coordinator, Lance Leipold, the head coach of Buffalo. There are guys out there that you could bring in, and you have to take that gamble. You have to take that chance, because it's either you're going to go and keep running your head into the wall and hoping for a different outcome, or you bring someone in to burst through that wall for them. So for me, it's just been as it was touched on with Penn State, they got to get out to good starts. You got to have that's what I want to see from Michigan, because in that loss against Wisconsin, I understand it's tough. 2 interceptions, your first 2 drives, and Wisconsin turns them into touchdowns right away. But there comes a point where there's pride on the players. What are you playing for? You got to go out there and punch your opponent in the mouth. And the same thing for the coaching staff. Joe Milton, will he be back at quarterback today? I think so. I don't think he lost his job yet. But for the coaching staff as well, what are you going to do to change? What are you going to do to bring your guys up? I do think Michigan wins this one, but only because it's Rutgers.
As Sean Zock is saying, is Jim Harbaugh's job safe? I think as of right now, yes. But if they lose to Rutgers today, that will be the straw that broke the camel's back. He might not board the plane back to Ann Arbor from Piscataway, New Jersey. Jim Harbaugh's contract expires at the end of next year. As it stands right now, it's been speculated his buyout would be about $10 million if Michigan decided to part ways with Harbaugh at the end of this season. We've seen that precedent kind of set across the college football landscape, with South Carolina firing Will Muschamp earlier this week. That buyout near $15 million. In times that have not been kind to athletic departments due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that doesn't seem that logistically plausible, but you never know. If Michigan loses to Rutgers today, I would not be surprised if Jim Harbaugh is not the head coach at the end of the season. One more game to touch on before we get to our game picks. We are now down to about 4 minutes until the first kickoff of the day between Ohio State and Indiana, and the game we are about to touch on, Nebraska and Illinois. George, you called this a must-win for the Huskers, 2 teams coming off their first wins of the season a weekend ago. What do you like between the Huskers and the Illini today at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska?
I just like that Nebraska has figured out Illinois' defense. Their last 2 wins against the Illini, 1,280 yards. They put up 662 on the ground, 96 points. Now, Luke McCaffrey taking over at quarterback for this offense really takes away from the vertical attack in the passing game, but he can run the heck out of the ball for them. They had over 200. He had over 200 total yards against Penn State, 2 touchdowns as well. And so we'll see on that. Brandon Peters should return for Illinois today from COVID protocol. But I just think the Cornhuskers have it figured out. I think their defense, they're going to ride that momentum from the win over Penn State as well. The defense was out there making plays, had a bunch of red zone stands as well. I don't think Illinois gets their second win today. I think Nebraska does.
It's kind of strength on strength for these 2 teams. Nebraska's rushing attack is the best part of their game. Illinois' rushing attack is the best part of their game, going against the other 2 defenses that are not great. Nebraska ranks 13th in the Big Ten in rush defense. Illinois is dead last at 14th. We'll see who can control the pace of play. Nebraska will try to use that RPO and speed game to outrun those Illinois defenders. Illinois will probably do the same, even if Brandon Peters is back after Isaiah Williams wowed Illinois' fan base in that opening win for them against Rutgers last year. So, George, let's get to our game picks. About 120 seconds until Indiana and Ohio State kick off on Fox for the battle at the Big Ten East. But we're going to go reverse chronologically, start with that Michigan and Rutgers game that is the Big Ten nightcap. Michigan is a 13-point favorite on the road against Rutgers. What do you like?
I just like that it's Michigan. They, if they go back to their week 1 win, the depth they had, all the running backs, just go with the ground game, attack Rutgers there. And for the defensive secondary, you guys were able to limit Rashad Bateman. You should be able to limit Rutgers athletes. For that reason, I do like the Wolverines 38-17. I like them in this one.
I still can't pick against Michigan when they line up against Rutgers. I can't believe I'm saying this. I was disappointed in the Scarlet Knights last week in their performance against Illinois. Never thought I'd be disappointed or let down by Rutgers football, but I have to lean with Michigan again today. I just can't see them losing, and I can't see them not winning by at least 2 scores. That is my prediction. If Rutgers covered somehow, though, I wouldn't be totally shocked, but I'm going to agree with George. Michigan wins by at least 2 touchdowns. Now that Iowa-Penn State game in the 3:30 p.m. Eastern slot on Big Ten Network. As I mentioned, the line has moved like crazy. Iowa was the favorite heading into yesterday. As it stands right now, Penn State a 2-point favorite at home. George, what does Vegas know that we don't?
I think they know that Will Levis, I think, should get the start in this one. That's what it hinders on for me to pick Penn State. He can get it done with his legs, has big arm as well. He connected with Pat Freiermuth. What would have been an 85-yard touchdown to Freiermuth. He didn't get caught from behind. He is a good runner, too. Had 72 yards against Nebraska on the ground. I just think he gives offense juice that Sean Clifford clearly does not provide. And also Spencer Petras, completing just 54% of his passes on the year. I think Nittany Lions defense has to take that over. I got Penn State in this one, winning 35-21.
I think if Penn State was not a name brand, Iowa would be about a 9-point favorite. I like what the Hawkeyes are doing. They've won 2 straight. That defense is playing so well. The rushing attack is really starting to work for Brian Ferentz and that offensive group. I'm leaning with Iowa. I think they pull off the win on the road in Happy Valley against the Nittany Lions. The game we just touched on, Illinois, Nebraska, the Huskers up to a 16.5-point home favorite. You called it a must-win for Nebraska. You think they win, but do they cover?
Yes, I do. I got them winning 43-28. So that'll hit the over at 59, but Nebraska still gets the win there.
I think Illinois' offense does enough on that ground game against the Nebraska defense. Yeah, you're doing the math in your head. That would be the over, but Nebraska would not cover that.
I'm doing the over for the cover. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, there you go. I appreciate it. That's what we got to do. Mental math at this time. I think Nebraska's offense will do well. They will win by 2 scores. I just don't think it's enough to get over 16.5. So the final 2 games, showdown Saturday, as we are about to get rolling for that kickoff between Indiana and Ohio State. Let's first start with the Big Ten West, Northwestern and Wisconsin. The Badgers, a 7.5-point road favorite in a place they have struggled, just 1-5 in their last 6 in Evanston, Illinois. Do you think Wisconsin wins and covers to take that top spot, pole position in the Big Ten West Division?
Ben, Northwestern's defense has allowed just 4.8 yards per pass attempt this season. They have 4 interceptions on throws, 20-plus yards downfield. Graham Mertz, 3 for 5, 110 yards, 1 touchdown on those throws. But he's completed 74% of his passes. I like his accuracy. He just has it. The ground game does have to get going. As I touched on, Northwestern doesn't let anything get going. We saw the Jets sweep a lot last week, but from this experienced linebacking core, I don't expect them to fall for it. It's going to be hat-on-half football. Your best against their best. I love the game. I love the matchups. But we saw how dominant Wisconsin was not at full strength. Rashad Wildgoose is back in that secondary. Peyton Ramsey makes plenty of mistakes. Badgers have the better offense, no matter how much of they struggled against Northwestern in the past. As Graham Mertz says, whoever plays harder, smarter, and more physical will earn it today. I like the Badgers in this one. 17-10 the final. There is the under. They do not cover, but 17-10 or 17-13. I see Wisconsin just pulling this one out, and that's how good Northwestern is.
We have talked about how good these defenses are. The discerning factor in my mind is that Wisconsin offense that, yes, a small sample size, but is a top 10 efficient offense across the entire country. That ground game that worked so well against Michigan last week, 341 yards against the Wolverines. I think it does enough, and Graham Mertz makes enough plays to beat Northwestern today, but it's not by more than 1 score because this is the most classic Big Ten game you will see. I'm going 24-20. Wisconsin comes out on top. They have the head-to-head tiebreaker, but Northwestern covers. So our final game, as the Hoosiers have just taken the field in Columbus, Ohio, Indiana and Ohio State for first place in the Big Ten East. We have some fan opinion on who will win this game. Dylan Dybel, the tall guy, says Ohio State by 1 billion. I don't know if that's feasibly possible, Dylan, but that is what he is doing today with the Buckeyes. George, what are you liking between Ohio State and Indiana? The Buckeyes, a nearly 3-touchdown favorite.
Although Jay did touch on it, that the Buckeyes secondary does concern me, but who Ohio State has is an NFL player under center. That's in Justin Fields. I'll take him 7 days out of the week, 10 times out of 10, maybe even 11 out of 10. He takes care of the ball. He's played in the biggest games possible outside of the national championship. This is the real first big stage game for IU, and it is in the Horseshoe. Empty or not, there is going to be that part of it that will play into IU and how they perform as well. I love what Tom Allen is doing. I love how aggressive they played. They are playing for each other. They love each other, but give me experience, give me talent, give me the home team. I got Ohio State in this one, 49-21. So give me the over and the Buckeyes cover.
I hope this game is competitive, at least through that first half. I don't want people to look at Indiana and say, oh, they were frauds. They've beaten teams that have just 3 wins combined so far this season. I believe in what the Hoosiers are doing. I think they are one of the best teams in the Big Ten Conference. I truly do. They have come out and looked like the better team in every game they have played so far this season. It's just not enough against Ohio State. A lot of Big Ten opponents can't do enough to slow down Ohio State. I think the Buckeyes win 41-24, but by that margin, I think IU covers. So This has been the second ever iteration of Locked On Big Ten Game Day Live. George and I finishing just up as we get to the start of Indiana and Ohio State here on Showdown Saturday. Two massive games that will likely decide the divisional races in both the Big Ten East and the Big Ten West. He is George Bilecki, a sports reporter and anchor at NBC 15 in Madison, Wisconsin. I am Ben Stevens, the host of Locked On Big Ten. Let's enjoy some Big Ten football on Showdown Saturday in the conference. George, always a pleasure.
Always, Ben. Have a good one, brother.